Konnichiwa minasan, Ayo desu. Kyou wa eigo de hanashimasu. If you clicked on this video, you're probably here because you want to know how I've been able to read a full-length Japanese book in only a year and 6 months. I have my bullet points like right over here. So if I look here, I'm just trying to make sure that I don't forget anything. Recently, I finished reading this book and I was able to read it in about a week and a half. I never studied Japanese in college. All of my studying has been self-study. So I will share with you how I came to be able to read Japanese books from nothing in about a year and a half, the reasons why I picked Japanese as the language to learn, how long it's been since I started learning Japanese, and I also share 7 tips and tricks throughout the video that has helped me along the way. The first time that I came in contact with Japanese was in the year 2014, and it was through anime. I watched my first anime in 2014, fell in love with it, and from then on, I've watched a ton. I watched a ton of anime. By 2018, I had started reading Japanese light novels, but in English, of course, because a lot of the animes would only take a piece of the beginning part of the book or the manga, whatever it is, and then stop there. So if I want to know what happens after the anime, I pick up the book. So but in 2020, in the year 2020, I watched an anime called Ascendance of a Bookworm, and I fell in love with the story so much. I wanted more. So I picked up the book from where the anime had ended, and I believe I fell in love with it even more, to the point where I read all of the English publications that were available at the time. But then that came the problem. I wanted to read more. I wanted to catch up with the story, but the rest of the publications at the time was about maybe 10 to 15 of the publications were in Japanese, not in English. And the English publication only comes out like about every 3 months. That leads me to my first tip for you: motivation. Motivation is absolutely important for you to be able to learn any language. You need to have the desire to want to learn the language. And for me, I found my motivation in wanting to read the Japanese books so that I wouldn't have to wait for the English version to come out before reading the book. Which leads me to my second point: have a goal. Have a defined goal. My defined goal was I want to be able to read the Japanese versions of this specific book without having to wait for the English versions to come out. And so I decided to learn Japanese. Yay! For English speakers, the most difficult language to learn is Mandarin. The second most difficult language is Arabic. And the third most difficult language, you guessed it, Japanese. The Japanese language has 3 different writing systems. The hiragana, which has about 43 characters and over 60 phonetic characters. They have the katakana and they have the kanji. The kanji apparently has over 40,000 characters. Although in modern Japanese, they only use about 4,000 to 5,000 characters. But imagine, as an English speaker, all I had to do was learn 26 letters and a couple phonetic sounds, and I was good to go. But with Japanese, no. A university graduate would know about 4,000 to 5,000 kanji, but in order to be able to achieve my goal, which is to read a book, all I need to know is about 2,000 kanji. Specifically 2,136 kanji I need to know, which are called the Joyo kanji or the daily use kanji. And you need to know a little over 2,000 kanji in order to be able to read most text, 98% of text. So I started learning kanji in August of 2021 using this app called Wanikani. And it says on their first email that If you want to get to the finish line, in the case of wani-kani, that's being able to read 99% of the kanji that you see in Japanese books, manga, news, and blogs. And that was my goal, so that worked for me. I wanted to learn all the kanji, all 2,000 and some kanji, so I could read the book that I wanted to read. And as a disclaimer, I should say, before I started learning Japanese in August of 2021, I had already learned a year before. I learned the hiragana and katakana characters. But that took about a week, learned it on YouTube, and I just kept refreshing my memory on that. And then before then, I'd do like 5 minutes of Duolingo a day, just so I could learn how to say thank you or how are you and things like that. But as of the recording of this video, I have learned 1,625 kanji, I believe I've learned. And with only 1,620 kanji, and the vocabulary that comes with it, I'm able to read and understand the books that I want to read. Depending on the type of book that I am reading at the moment, I either have to use the dictionary more or I have to use the dictionary a little less.
This book I mentioned earlier, I just finished reading, is a medical fiction romance book.
There were a lot of medical terms in it, and so I had to use the dictionary a little more frequently. But it's not at a pace where it's interrupting my enjoying of the story. I'd check a word like 3 times, maybe 3 to 5 times in one chapter. And by the time you get halfway through the book, you don't need the dictionary anymore. Because books tend to repeat words, and all the words you don't know, you probably covered like in the first half of the book. So you're able to sail through to the end of the book. That brings me to my third point. Start small. It is important that you pace yourself. Before I got this far, I would read simple books. But before I learned that lesson, I had bought a couple of the books that I wanted to read, even though my Japanese wasn't proficient enough yet. And an example of that would be this one. This was the first book that I bought. This was the first one that I bought many years ago. And while reading it, I would like make notations like right there. The ones that I couldn't read, I would write their readings on the book and check the meaning in the dictionary. And I gotta tell you, it was slow and it was tedious and it was demotivating. And then the next thing I did was I tried to use Google Translate to, translate the book, but that was a mess. Didn't work either. So I decided to be patient and simply just grow my list of vocabulary until I was able to read the book. But then a couple months in, after learning kanji, I read this book called Toire no Megami-sama. This book, very small book. Very easy to read. The story was interesting. It made me cry. But as you can see, it has what the Japanese call furigana in it. So if you look here, I hope you can see this. The kanji is there, and then hiragana is right next to it, and that's called furigana. Furigana just shows you the meaning of the kanji, or the reading of the kanji rather, in hiragana, so you're able to read it. When I first started, I would learn only like 5 kanji or 5 vocabulary words a day. I'd learn just 5 words a day, just 5 kanji a day, or just a mixture of 5 kanji and words a day. And the more your brain gets used to the new language, the more information that it can consume. To the point where now I'm able to learn about 40, 30, 40, even up to 80 on a good day of new kanji or vocabulary. So just take it small, bits and pieces at first. This leads me to my 4th point, which is consume a lot of media, a lot of Japanese media. It is important for you to interact with the language while you're learning it. Up until this point, I have been watching a ton of Japanese anime, like I mentioned, but if anime is not for you, that's okay. I have a friend who listens to lots of music and learn Japanese that way. Just find what you like. Just make sure that you're consuming Japanese content one way or another. Interacting with these forms of media kind of helps you to learn Japanese words, and you learn grammar, and you learn sentence structure. And it got to a point for me where I would see kanji, or I would see a word, I would put it into the dictionary, and I'd be like, oh, I already know this word because I heard it a ton, probably in some anime somewhere. So that's passive learning. Just consuming Japanese media is passive learning, and that's important. Then at this point, I'm 1 year into my journey of learning Japanese words and Japanese vocabulary, and I decided to pick up a Japanese manga that had furigana in it. An example of that is this book. So if I opened it like this, manga generally have less words than full-length books, and they have also the furigana that I mentioned earlier. So even if I see a kanji that I don't yet know, the furigana readings are there. So all I have to do is just check for its meaning in the dictionary. So it goes by fast. You learn more words that way. So I bought a ton of Japanese manga. I would go to a library here in Japan and buy about 100 yen to 250 yen books a piece. And that's about 100 yen is less than $1. So on average, I'd buy a ton of books, $100 on average, and just binge them, just binge read. And all of them having furigana. I'd find books that had furigana with them and read those. And I gotta tell you, it is important that you find materials that interest you. So at the beginning part of my journey, I would try to read like the news online. There's this website called NHK Easy News that takes news informations and dumps it down into simple Japanese. I tried reading those for a while, but I got bored and it didn't work out, and I stopped reading those. So what I like is romance. I like a lot of romance. So I got all the books that I bought were always in the romance genre because I know that I will read it. I'll be interested in it, and I'll read it, and I will read it. So I read those. And that brings me to my fifth point. Just take the challenge. What was challenging for me up until that point is grammar. Grammar is not my favorite thing to learn. But in order to continue to grow, I had to learn grammar. It was at this point I picked up a grammar textbook, because grammar is not like vocabulary. You can't just memorize it. You need to learn it in context. So I picked up a grammar book and I started to learn grammar officially. But it was all still self-study. Whatever aspect that you find difficult for you on your language learning journey, don't let it get you down. Just challenge it and keep challenging it. And it's important that you start now. Don't start tomorrow or next month. Start now, even if it's in bits and pieces. Finally, in February 13 of 2023, I was able to finish reading my first full-length book in Japanese. I'm so proud of myself. I finished my first full-length Japanese book. I still need to have a dictionary with me, but I finished it. I'm so proud of myself. And the book is as you might imagine, it is also the Japanese version of the book I mentioned that I really fell in love with, Ascendance of a Bookworm. The Japanese name is Honzuki no Gekokujo. And it has furigana in it. It does have furigana in it because this is the children's version. But regardless, I was able to finish reading a full-length book, and I understood completely the whole story. I was so stoked. So it was exactly a year and a half from August 2021 when I started learning kanji to February 13 of 2023 when I was able to finish my first full-length book, exactly a year and a half. But as you can imagine, most books for adults, not adult books, most books for adults in Japan are don't have furigana in them. Books with furigana in them are usually for kids. So, but about 10 months after that, after the February date, what month is that? November? December. So in December, I was able to finish reading this book. Also, a Send Us of a Bookworm. However, this one was a version that I had not read in English at all. This one I had read in English. I kind of knew the story, but I was able to follow along in Japanese. But this book I read when the English publication was not out yet. And as you can see, it's bigger and it has no furigana in it. And I was able to completely read it. And so after I read this one, then I read this one, and now I am reading this one, the next book in the series. I'm reading this one, the next book in the series. And occasionally, I still have to look up words in the dictionary. But like I mentioned before, it's not at a pace that affects my reading of the story or stop me from enjoying the story. But I mean, even when I read English books, every now and then, rarely, but I still find words that I don't know and I have to look up in the dictionary. I think that's going to happen forever. So that is totally fine. But it's very exciting. I achieved my goal that I had set out to achieve from 2020, and well, here I am. Currently, I still have about 500 more kanji that I need to learn before I know all the daily use kanjis, but I believe I'll be able to achieve that in the next couple of months. Last 2 tips for you on your language learning journey is remember to take breaks. I had times where I didn't want to learn anything. My brain was saturated, and when those times came, I just simply stopped learning. I stopped learning anything new. The way Wanikani works, it kind of brings back whatever it is that you've learned periodically. Like if I learn a word today or a kanji today, it would remind me of the kanji in 3 hours, then 6 hours, then in 8 hours, then in 2 weeks, and then in 3 months. So I would do the reviews, but I wouldn't learn anything new. Just take a break. If you're tired, if you're feeling fatigued, just take a break. But even though you take a break, if you have the motivation that I mentioned as a first tip, it will keep you going. And finally, my last tip, the 7th one, is make sure to check and celebrate your milestones. During the whole process and everything, I would go back to the books that I had already bought, and I would open up a random page, and I would be amazed about how much more kanji I could read and how much more words that I could recognize. It was totally exciting. I would share it with my friends, and they would be excited for me, and it would keep me happy. I treat myself to dessert sometimes just to celebrate like how much I had come and how far I had grown. So it's important for you to celebrate your milestones. Make sure to praise yourself for how much that you have achieved. You deserve it. If you watched this video so far, I hope that my tips have been useful for you. I hope I'm able to encourage you on your learning journey. It's very exciting when you achieve what you set out to do. I made this YouTube channel to practice my speaking skills. They are far from perfect. My speaking skills is way below my reading skills. Reading skills, speaking skills, totally different skills. But I'm practicing, I'm not giving up, and I continue to learn and I continue to grow. If anyone is interested in knowing the actual books and apps and resources that I used for self-studying up until this point, just let me know in the comments and I'll make a video about it. Mata ne!